Members of the committee for coming to yet another of our marathon sessions to address the 13 articles which we were presented with just a short number of weeks ago. We finished in our last meeting approximately half, not quite half of them, we still have a few to go, and we'll have presentations this evening by the zoning board, by the town administrator, and I think, and
for Blue Hills? Blue Hills.
Oh, the Blue Hills Regional Tech. Very sorry, yes, of course. I will ask those presenting to keep your comments to 7 minutes or less. I am rude and I will cut you off. You'll have 3 minutes for questions. We're going to keep that because if we don't get through this tonight, then the warrant will not be served to the town meeting because some of us have obligations that will keep us from satisfying those. So 7 minutes, I'm timing you. 3 minutes with questions, committee. Make sure they're really good and concise, because we do have a number of things to talk about. If we have other color to add to this, then we will do so later, but we do have to adhere to that pretty closely, because I think most of the information has been circulated in timely enough fashion that the committee has come across its views, and we'll have a pointed question for you. So, meeting is called to order. We have the minutes from our meeting on September 11th. I beg your pardon, on September 14th. Have been circulated. Are there any additions or modifications that we need to make? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion to accept the minutes of September 14th.
Motion to accept.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. So, our first presentation, Mike Dennehy, our town administrator, is welcome to come and talk to us about several of the issues that we have. And if you have specific questions for Mike on the warrants that we have not voted on, please bring them up when he's completed. Mike, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First and foremost, I try to do this every time I meet with groups, and I'll be brief, but I can't thank you enough for your service and volunteering. Those of you that are on the Warrant Committee again after last spring's double-decker, I appreciate you coming back. The new members, welcome. I look forward to working with you. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So, we'll get right into our water article?
All yours.
Sure, yeah. So, we presented an article, myself and the town accountant had actually tried to squeeze this in for May town meeting, but we didn't have enough time with everything, with the 54 articles that we're working on. So, the long and short of it is, we worked with Woodard and Curran and our new TBW director. The long and short of it is, we are going to take $430,000 from our water surplus, which as of June 30th, 2016, sat at $2.6 million. We're going to take $430,000 of that to keep the water rates flat for FY18. So what you see in the table is just some math to adjust the article that was presented at May's town meeting. This is a good story. I hope people appreciate the work that was done through this. Our group at Woodard and Curran and our new DPW director, who has a history of this in his work in Boston Water and Sewer. This is one of their first tasks that they set forth on. So we will have at least $2.2 million left in that water. It's called retained earnings now. Tom, you would probably be able to describe it better than I am. But after an enterprise fund matures, what you have left becomes retained earnings after, I believe, 36 months. So we have to call it retained earnings now on the books. So as I said, it was very quickly presented as an idea by the town accountant to me in May, but it was a little too late to get an article through town meeting. So this will keep the water rates flat for FY18. The sewer rates will also be flat, but we don't need to borrow from the sewer surplus at this time.
My question, I'm sorry.
No, you go first.
Is some of what's driving that, well, MWA assessment probably is driving it up somewhat. Is the debt service driving it up too, or a little bit?
A little bit, yeah. I think we saved some money with the consumption 2 years ago with the drought. Mm-hmm. We sold a lot more water than we thought we would, which padded our books a little bit.
Yeah.
But rule of thumb, you don't want to take too much out of your retained earnings. And this was a number that would get us to the flat for FY18.
For those of you who don't know how MWA assessments work, they have a December year end, not a junior end. And then their assessment is a year behind, so it's almost as much as 18 months behind by the time we get it. So MWA looks at it, after they figure their budget, they look at consumption by community from the previous year, and that's how they set the assessment for the current year's budget and that year's consumption. The sewer is a little bit different, because the sewer's a bunch of different factors. Consumption's one, but there are other factors that figure into the sewer rates too. So it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, just to answer that question specifically, looking at the report that the DPW director generated for the board at the August 14th meeting when he presented it, MWRA rates went up 4%.
Okay.
So this $430,000 will help absorb that, a piece of that.
Is this a common practice?
Not too common. I think in 2013 we did it. We adjusted the Maytown meeting. Well, they did. I wasn't here then, but it's not the first time.
Got it. I guess that should be my question. Is this the first?
I think reducing rates is not a common occurrence.
Got it.
Maggie?
I have a question because I have a copy of the articles and I was a member of town meeting last year. So you're referencing Article 22, but on Article 16, that's when the water enterprise revenue was, appropriated. And they had $485,000 in indirect costs. And I'm curious if this money is going to be taken away from the indirect costs, which part of it is capital outlay, expenses. We have a debt service of $645,000.
No, it's not the indirect money. $485,000 is over and above that.
Are we taking away from a rainy day by just taking that money?
You're taking away, well, it is
Yeah,
kind
in
of rainy
essence,
day
yeah.
money, yes, in that sense.
So is the question, are we reducing our retention, what we have in reserve, below a prudent level, Maggie?
No, I thought I answered that question. What we're taking.
2.2 million in there, right?
At least 2.2. 2.2 was based on June 30th, 2016, and the reason we don't have current numbers is Mass DOR hasn't approved our enterprise fund through calendar year, or through fiscal year 18 yet, right?
Okay.
Which just ended 3 months
Yeah,
ago.
okay.
They haven't processed it.
Yeah, Chris, you had your hand up. Sorry.
At the risk of betraying my own ignorance as opposed to illuminating something, so Mike, what is this going to mean 2 years from now? In other words, is there the potential for sticker shock if there's not more money? In other words, the assessment keeps going up, right? So
Yep.
let's say it goes up at the, whatever the normal rate is. Does that mean that absent taking money from the fund 2 years from now, we're going to be seeing much greater increases than we would if we allowed it to increase gradually?
Not a subject matter expert, but I think if this is a pattern you get into in a couple of years, like if we were to do this next year, I think we'd see sticker shock one day when the water consumption catches up with us. Again, it's driven a lot, I won't say a large percentage of our retained earnings came from 2 summers ago when there was a drought and people used a lot more water than they did. MWRA communities don't have a ban on water. I think that drove a lot of the retained earnings, but the town accountant is very prudent when it comes to this stuff, and this is well thought out. Wood and Curran, the consultants, have worked with communities before. This is not a pattern you get into. This is by no means do you start dipping into your rainy day fund. And will it catch up to us if it rains from now until, next July? Obviously, the consumption rates will go down in the town, and we'd have to look at the revenue again. But it's consistent with let's say there's $2.2 million in there, and our annual ask is 6.5. That's a third. We have a third in reserves right now.
It sounds like there's a
I don't
risk.
think it's sticker shock.
Right.
Yeah, there's a little bit of risk in it, of course. Yeah, but I think it's very calculated.
Gwen, please.
I noticed that in at least one of the reports we have, there's 4 different tiers of pricing for the water usage, and it's based on the amount that's
Consumption,
actually
yeah.
consumed. Was there a thought of having it apply to, or is there any limitation of having it apply to fewer than the 4, so that you're just you're keeping levels flat for, say, tiers 1 and 2, but having the actual rate apply for the higher usage?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think what you see in normal years when it's not flat is that raise your increase in tier 3 and 4 for the people that use more, you make it less attractive for people to use more money, right? So that if you're in tier 1 and you don't consume as much, your rate increase isn't necessarily what it would be if you were in 3 and 4, and you're using a lot more water.
Oh, so is that what we're doing here, though? Would the
No, we're keeping it flat in all
For
four
everyone.
tiers, yeah.
So it's
Why-
being
The
allocated all the
tier
way
rates are
down.
different.
Yeah.
The tier rates are higher for the higher.
Yeah, I saw that. But is there a reason why we're not doing the approach to keep it flat for 1 and 2 and increase it for
I can
higher
answer
usage?
that. The reason is the majority of the usage is gonna be in tiers 1 and 2. So you would drive the tiers 3 and 4 rates up to compensate for that difference of holding that flat so dramatically that you'd have people screaming at you.
I get that, and I noticed that from the usage rates in there as well. But for, say that you kept it flat for those, for 1 and 2 and didn't overcompensate, but
You'd have-
had the
you would be out of
relevant
balance.
increase.
You have to have a balanced budget. So you need the revenue to balance the estimated expenses. So.
I don't think I'm eloquently describing.
I think she's saying then you would just use less of this 430,000.
Yes.
Right, so only the amount of the 400, whatever that percentage that
Necessary to the
applies
first
to
two.
the first two, to keep those the same.
Increase 3 and 4?
3 and 4, not to hit the 430, but to make up the difference between.
Meaning you would be what, just giving less money?
Yeah. Might I just add, because I kind of had the same question in terms of the tier. So part of the tiering was to incentivize folks to conserve energy.
Right.
If we stabilize the rates from year to year, although consumption is where it is, there's no incentive for those in 3 and 4 to change their behavior. So I think the question really is there an opportunity to at least not use as much as the 400 to cover the entire, rate increase, but some of it so that you're still putting in a piece to
Sure.
disincentivize
3 and 4.
3 and 4.
Right.
Doug, did you have a question?
He was tagging along that, and probably just for more round-out information, is if this was not allowed, did not pass, how much would the rates have increased
2.6%?
Yeah, aggregately
for each
2.6.
tier?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that was just meant combined rate.
I don't know if they said it, I'd have to go back to Woodard and Curran to see how it would be rated, but I'm assuming it would be, to this gentleman's point, and I'm sorry, I don't know everyone's name here tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
In order to de-incentivize usage, you should make that higher down the end. But to Tom's point, you still have to generate the revenue number you're looking for.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just, you can tag on to theirs and maybe to round it out is, how much would the amount be if we increased the top tiers 3 and 4 by the 2.6% otherwise?
Right,
And you
that
use
I
a
can get
lesser
you, yeah.
amount to handle 1 and 2.
That's part of their algorithm, I'm sure.
Oh.
I could get you that stuff if you want.
I think that's what I get.
Jane, did you have a question?
Well, I'm always for giving money back to the taxpayers. I'm always for that. So why would we increase their rates? Give it back to them. It's their money.
Well, not to debate amongst themselves, but it would.
Really, why would you
instead of
hold
giving
on?
That's
it
a
back, it's-
physical question. I think it's a little bit beyond our purview in this
Yeah.
meeting.
Well, but I do think, isn't it right that everybody's a tier 1 until they're a tier 2?
Yep.
Yeah, so you would be giving it back to the people who have the lesser use, but it's everybody up until the tier 2. It would just be keeping because again, this is using taxpayer dollars that have already been collected to put them towards. So in effect, the people who were giving money back to the high users of water, that belongs to the town as a whole, so they get a disproportionate benefit from the dollars being applied because they get more of the 430 goes to the higher users because they get all of their 1 and 2 plus their 3 and 4, and your average user just gets the 1 and 2.
Right. I still think you should just leave it at the 430. I think you should give it, I think you should.
Please.
To that end, I'd like to make a motion to accept the article as presented.
I'm sorry.
Are we done? with
Second,
the-
do we have any further discussion? If none, all in favor of adopting the amendment to Article 22 as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Opposed? 1, 2, 3.
One other thing, Mike, could you get us the date in the suggested comment?
Okay, that's it.
Oh, yeah, that was 8/14/2017. This will be updated, yeah. They presented it August 14th.
I have a question regarding water and sewer, but it's not on this. It's a couple, maybe you can get the answer, you have it. A couple of years ago, if people recall, the town of Milton found a lot of illegal sewer hookups, and people weren't paying their sewer bills. And it went back many years, maybe 20 years or so. And I think they were about 130 people, if I recall. And the town was able to go back 6 years and collect the money for us. So my question is, have you collected all of the money, and how much of that, how much was that you were able to collect for this?
We talked about that briefly with Alan Bishop the other day. We're working on some GIS stuff, and some, that subject matter came up. It was just shy of 150 homes, I believe, or addresses, but I can get you that information.
Yeah.
What the dollar amount was
Maybe how much
and
you've
what percentage is collected. Yep.
collected so far.
Okay, thank you very much, committee, for that vote. Mike,
8/14/17.
Mike, we had a question that came up at the last meeting about the maintenance of buildings, Section
Yes.
5 amendment to the zoning bylaws, subsection 1, maintenance of buildings in any zoning district, all buildings shall be maintained in a structurally sound and safe condition by their owners or other responsible person. Please tell me what the hell that means.
So I watched the tape. I turned on Channel 8 on Thursday night, but you were trumped by the planning board. So I caught up.
Their stuff is gripping anyway.
Right, Alex? But I did catch up I caught up with Joe Prondak today.
Okay.
Ultimately, the building code, which is a state regulation,
Right.
trumps all. If his question was, and to Tom's point, I believe this was written by a citizen. We've gone out several times in the spring
Yes.
to look at some distressed property in town with the building inspector. And technically, they are up to code with respect to the building code.
Okay, so I guess that Mr. Whiteside is here. Al, why don't you come up and sit with the microphone so we can hear the, this is, I think, going to be enlightening for a lot of us. But I guess the question that I would ask you, Mike, is this something that requires our vote as a recommended or not recommended warrant? Because if it's trumped by the state code, it's almost...
Yeah,
Academic.
he referenced a bylaw in the town a couple of years ago that was passed, that pool fences have to be 5 feet.
Okay.
The state ordinance in the building code is 4 feet.
4 feet.
So guess what? 4 feet wins.
Yeah,
The
right.
bylaw in town does not trump the building code. So
In which case, I'll put the same question, because from a practical consideration, do we have to spend time discussing this or not? Because if it is something that is going to have an effect at the town meeting, or is something that's going to be discussed, we'll do it. Otherwise, we have other things we can devote our attention to.
his interpretation
Yeah.
was that this constituent might have been talking about property and not necessarily building, at which point it's not written that way.
Yes, not
But,
at all.
you know,
Yeah.
then you get into, my grass is cut, is it cut 4 feet?
Right, I mean-
3 feet, 2 feet, you know,
Has nothing to do with safety or
Yeah.
or structure.
Mr. Whiteside is
Safe
chairman of
and
the planning
structurally
board.
sound. If you require the buildings, Alex Whiteside, chairman of the planning board, to require that buildings be safe and structurally sound seems to me a perfectly reasonable thing to require. And in fact, there was in the Patriot Ledger just the other day an article about how to get people to keep their buildings safe and structurally sound. Why not provide for it? It doesn't hurt a thing. It is not inconsistent with the building code. It is thoroughly consistent with the building code. It's a good article.
Chris?
What's the enforcement mechanism that this is tied to?
The building commissioner.
The one, I'm sorry?
The building commissioner has the authority to enforce the zoning.
Okay.
So he would cite an owner as having a building that is not safe or structurally sound.
Can I follow up?
Please.
If not tied to the specific articles of the building code, how is the building commissioner to determine how to define the term structurally sound and safe condition?
I would think that he would refer to the building code.
So then isn't this superfluous because the building code already covers it?
I don't think so. I think that, the building code has to do with buildings. And as buildings get older, this is a maintenance article. I mean, the building code says this is how you should construct your building. It doesn't really refer to how you should maintain your building. So I don't think that this is duplicative or redundant or any of those things.
Tom?
Alex, taking Henry's up as an example, that was maintenance. I mean, that was deterioration, maintenance, and we condemn that under the state code.
Right.
I mean...
And what happened?
Well, what's going to happen under this? Anything different?
Well, the building inspector would say, fix it.
And if he says no, or if he doesn't do
Then
it,
Or he hasn't got the
takes them
cash to do
court,
it.
and they get fined until they do so.
at what, $100 or, well,
At $100 a day.
Well, if it's collectible, that's a very nice idea, but
It never is, that's the
question is...
Well,
question is on the
I mean, there is no downside to this zoning.
I agree, there's no downside. I
And
just don't see
in
any
fact, there is
downside.
a potential upside.
And-
Please.
I would like to hear, well, I think I can guess what the potential upside is. The downside, of course, is that the term I used earlier is Trojan horse. I mean, essentially, it gives the building commissioner an enormous amount of power, latitude, that can be used arbitrarily simply for something that the commissioner doesn't like. And there's nothing in the way that this is written to prevent that.
He cites them, and then they go to the Board of Appeals, and the Board of Appeals says, Joe, come on. Don't, this is not what it means. I mean, there's an appeal mechanism, and it's not a terribly rigorous appeal mechanism.
That doesn't give me more confidence.
What?
That doesn't give me more confidence.
In any event, the building inspector is our zoning enforcement officer. I mean, if he wanted to go nitpick the zoning code, presumably, the building code, presumably he could do that too. This is, the citizens who suggested this said there are a lot of buildings in town that are not being maintained properly. And I think that they're right. And this is an effort to correct that situation.
Tom?
I guess my concern is what's the definition of safe and sanitary unless we use the state building code and that it could fall down, it's a hazard to people, which means that it should be condemned if they're not going to fix it.
Well, in housing is supposed to be decent, safe, and sanitary.
Sure.
No, it isn't. It is. There are standards that can be applied.
But if the house is badly in need of painting, is that
a safety condition? It's an aesthetic condition.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's rotting,
Well, if it's lead paint and kids play around there, I guess that's
if
a
it's
safety.
lead paint, then
Yeah, could be a safety.
But that's what I'm saying, if we try and, you certainly wouldn't condemn a building, and I'm not sure the state building code covers paint falling off a house.
We talked that specifically today, it doesn't.
So, so then somebody's got to make a determination of, well, is it safe and sound? I mean, I don't know.
It wouldn't be safe if lead paint were peeling off it.
I don't like the article personally.
Just a process question. If, let's say this committee were to say, look, if there's really an identifiable problem, then perhaps this can be drafted in a way that can be more specific. I think that might...
I'd be happy with that,
Yeah, I think that might lead to a more useful discussion, but I think... I mean, is that something that this particular citizen might be...
I mean, I don't know what you're asking me to do. If you want to come up with a draft article,
No.
I didn't think so.
Our responsibility is to vet the draft articles, not create them.
In the past, you often revise articles.
I'm not sure what we'd be revising.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, what does this mean?
Well,
At the initial.
I
understand the intent is for
there will
existing
be
as opposed to
people who
buildings.
will be unhappy with your if you decide that you don't want buildings to be maintained in a safe and structurally sound.
let's not poison the well there.
Okay,
I think that there's
we have time for two more questions on this.
I just
Gwen?
think there's a risk here that because of the ambiguity, the vagueness of the language, it can be used by, let's say, developers pointing out particular homes as a tool to drive people who may not have the resources available to make some less necessary fixes to their properties and essentially get those homes on the market. So ambiguity is not just because we enjoy unsafe housing, but it also protects citizens to be able to keep their properties and continue to occupy them.
I just don't think the words are ambiguous. That's just my view. But there you are.
Okay. Doug?
Then briefly, could you explain a situation where the building inspector would be using this article that's not otherwise covered in the building codes?
Well, I mean,
That
I
this
don't,
that
I
makes this
don't
necessary?
think the building inspector drives around and says, look at that window falling out of the building. That's not safe, and he says that, I mean, what part of the building code does he then cite the owner for having violated?
So does this or does it not actually add to
This
his-
does add, this is.
That's what I'm asking you. What does it do that it
It
doesn't
says
already have?
the building inspector sees the window falling out of the house
Mm-hmm.
and says that's not a safe condition, and he cites the owner, and the owner fixes it.
And he can
And that's
do
not
that now.
otherwise already in the building
What
code?
is the part of the building code that allows him to do that now?
You tell me.
I'm not the building
No,
inspector.
you tell
I don't
me,
know.
because I'm not sure that it exists.
That's why I'm asking the question. I don't think it does either.
Well, okay, so then there is a purpose for this, this article.
So what are the ramifications if an owner doesn't apply?
Then he gets cited, and if he disagrees, he can go to the Board of Appeals.
So with this, the building inspector can drive around town looking at the buildings and, aha, I see you.
Under
and
this, he
get
can, yes. But now he can
Other-
drive around and see all these unsafe conditions, and what does he do?
Tom, last question.
Okay, I mean, I know of numerous situations where Joe Klondike has, the latest one I can remember was Connor Robin Street in Canton Ave.
Correct.
The house was just littered with, the backyard, even though you couldn't see an awful lot from the street, was a junk pile.
Yeah.
And
Board of Health
he-
got involved
He
as
used
well.
something to get it.
Right.
But that was nuisance, general nuisance law.
Okay.
I think the question is, do we feel comfortable voting on this, or do we send it, as we did another article, back to committee for further clarification?
Is this a planning board article?
It's, yeah,
It didn't say on the bottom of this.
no, I actually, we voted, and we have our voted sections.
Okay.
And here it is. Why don't you,
Disseminate?
I'll keep one and pass it around. We probably will run out before it gets to you, Brian.
Okay,
Move to
I
remand
guess
the
I need
planning
a
board.
question of
Wanna
the sense
go?
of the
All right,
committee.
well,
Question
now
for the
then-
And we're
committee
not going to.
is that, is whether or not we can vote on this as is, or whether we want to remand it.
I move to remand to the planning board.
I second.
We have discussion on that for clarification. This is,
Can we
the
just look at this?
motion is to remand to committee for further clarification. Oh, here we have a modification here.
This is what we voted to recommend.
In zoning districts, all buildings shall be maintained in structurally sound and safe condition by their owners, and to act on anything related thereto, submitted by the planning board.
I'll move again.
I'll second.
Okay, is there discussion on this article as amended? And by the way, the committee has had a sense, just for anybody present, that anything presented to us and waved kind of under our noses like this will not be accepted in future. We have to have time to look at it and think about it.
Well, we
Just
did
for your
submit this
edification.
in early August.
Understood, but this is a modification to what was submitted, and that's my
This
point.
is as a result of our public hearing.
Understood.
And our public hearing resulted in our recommending some changes. That's why we have a public hearing.
Understood. But in order for the warrant committee to be able to deliberate, this is a minor one, but in future, anything that isn't this minor, or like this, that has any corrections, will not be accepted. That's the sense of the committee, and that's not being anything other than fair to the members of the committee who
And
need
it
time
makes-
to...
Makes our hearing process absolutely useless.
It doesn't, it just requires time for everybody concerned to have full disclosure and time to reflect. Okay, so we have this in front of us. It's a minor modification. I think we can accept that. Do we have any further discussion on this? We have a motion, it's been seconded, and asking if there's any additional discussion.
Yeah, I renewed my motion in light of that.
I second.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, do we have a vote in favor of remanding to committee for further clarification? All in favor? Brian, I can't see you down there, Brian. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
It's
6,
unanimous.
7, 8, 9, 10 in favor of remanding to committee, and 1 against, 1, 2 are happy with the way it is. Okay. 2 against. The motion is to send it back to the zoning board for a little more
You know,
clarification.
back to the planning board.
Sending back to the
Planning
to the planning board. Yes, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. We have 3 articles on the prohibition of marijuana establishment, 2 articles on the prohibition of marijuana establishments that are closely connected. Mike, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, the general bylaw I can speak to, that came from the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
We had met with Town Council's Representative Brandon Moss, who
This
has...
is Article 25, Chapter 25, right?
Yeah, who, Brandon Moss is a longtime employee of Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, Lehane, who is town council. He's been at the forefront of the marijuana legislation, trying to figure out what the state is doing with their next chess move. And he advised us to file both a general bylaw and a zoning bylaw, just to protect the town, which did vote, I believe 54-46 to denounce recreational marijuana in the town. So that this is the article from the Board of Selectmen as a general bylaw to basically place a moratorium on recreational marijuana.
Any questions? This is Article 25.
So the reason for the 2 is it's unclear as to whether it should be a zoning or general bylaw, so
Right, I think his impression was the Attorney General may
it should be
prefer
zoning.
a zoning bylaw, but just to cover the town. The Board of Selectmen decided to file a general bylaw as well.
Are these all the same?
No, there are 2. You'll
Yes.
see one
This is
is
from the planning
red,
board, one's from the...
one is red, one is a zoning article and one is a general bylaw article.
Okay.
Changes from previously submitted?
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, Chris, do you have a question?
Yeah, and I apologize that I don't know the text of the general law being referred to, but is the moratorium indefinite?
it's permanent ban.
Oh, it's permanent, I'm sorry, thank you.
Any other questions?
Which, under the bylaw, the prohibition. I mean, we have a temporary moratorium in place.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Do we have a motion to accept, oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to accept, do you want to do both of them, one at a time?
One at a time, just to be
I'd like to
safe.
make a motion to accept the general bylaw as presented.
Any discussion? All in favor?
One question.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was formulating that question. So there was, we were told that there's an opportunity for a revote, right? If a revote comes up, if 2/3 of the town votes in favor of, through referendum, in favor of establishing a marijuana law, opportunity here, no, how does that play into this permanent moratorium?
It's been abolished.
Okay, so there's no,
There's no vote needed.
Okay.
No vote of the voters. We need a vote of town meeting.
okay. Great,
So the
thanks.
vote is, any other questions, any other discussion?
Has there been any study of the increase in costs from legalization of marijuana generally? Because from what I see, most of the towns around us have approved it. So I imagine there's going to be an increase in costs for policing that compared against the loss of revenue by not having an establishment within Milton. Does that make sense?
What's the
So there's-
policing of what?
I would imagine that there is some increase in costs having legalized marijuana and policing efforts related to that.
Increased criminal activity.
Increased criminal activity, and some amount of that would be offset by having a location in town for the tax revenue, which I think was 3% last time we heard. We assessed an estimate of increased costs to the town from legalization by the towns on our borders, and then determined whether the 3% would be significant enough to consider having it in the town. Like, essentially, the question is, was there a financial assessment of the benefit?
Not to my knowledge.
Not like offsets, yeah.
Okay.
Without knowing all the particulars of the marijuana laws that were passed, is there a set amount that a personal user
Yes.
can sell?
Well, not sell. So I think it's still legal to
Distribute.
sell.
Have.
You can
Have,
give it.
you
You
can
can
have
give
and
it.
use.
You can gift it
or
to somebody.
distribute.
You can just,
Give
yeah.
it out and not, but I didn't know if there was an amount that they could sell, but would this ban a personal person distribute?
No,
Okay.
no.
Just can't put the store
People can
in
still
town.
grow it, people can still,
Establishments.
Would this prevent the town from regulating in any way yet? Because we just ban it outright, but the state says you could give some away.
you can't stop people from growing in the backyard, you can't stop people from possessing
Right.
small amounts. That's legal.
Yes.
So all this would do is, it's more the commercial, manufacturing, wholesale, retail sale, cultivation, those activities would be banned in the town. But certainly, any resident of the town could go outside the town and
Just start handing it out on the way to school or something.
No, that's illegal.
you can only possess so much.
So much.
I wonder if this
Yeah.
would cover things like a farmer's market.
Yeah. I mean, if you only have so much, you keep going back,
Just
getting
one.
more and go back. I mean, it's an absurd hypothetical. But
Yeah, I know.
hypotheticals in none of the
We're
cases.
splitting
And I
hairs.
didn't know if this would prevent the town from any type of regulation if that was permitted. It's
No, in
rather
terms of
than
that, no.
hamstringing us from future contingencies.
No, and
Margie, did you
clearly
have a
somebody
question?
driving through impaired through the town that consumed it in another town doesn't prevent that either.
I just have one question. I feel like this is at the beginning of something, and I know everyone's afraid about having marijuana in the town. We're very nervous about drugs and whatnot, but I hope that we can be open enough to perhaps have a moratorium for X amount of years until more knowledge is obtained, because we may be shooting ourselves in the foot by not being able in the future to think about having a retail store somewhere, because a lot of towns are going to be reaping in extra tax dollars, and we're very limited as it is. I'm not saying now, maybe in 5 years, we should be able to take another look at it. As the industry is growing, it's going to be revolving. They just hired someone for the state to be in charge of that.
It's a worthwhile consideration. Scott?
I would just say, aside from our personal views on this, again, this is one of those subjects that's going to be debated at length at town meeting.
Yes.
And in the essence of time, I would say we, to push forward on a vote with this and have,
Move forward.
the further details of this before the public at town meeting.
I think that's wise. I think that's wise. So if there's no other discussion or any other questions, all in favor of adopting this as presented by the selectmen for the general bylaws? All in favor?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 in favor. All opposed? Who opposed? Thank you very much. Let us turn then to the planning board's article, which is section 10 of the general bylaws, is the zoning bylaws, subsection T, adding this as written, which is actually surprisingly like what we have just voted.
I'll make a motion to approve the articles written.
Same.
Any discussion? Very good. All in favor? All opposed? Same. Okay, 12 to 2. Thank you very much. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
might I suggest that the Blue Hills group jump up?
I was just
don't-
going to invite
okay,
them. They've been
sorry.
very patient. If you don't mind just waiting a little bit, because there's really only one issue for them, and there are a couple more for you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to have our friends from Blue Hills Regional here to talk about the request of the town, which is included in your packet.
Before they start, I have a question. Who submitted this article?
Which one?
The one regarding the,
Blue Hills?
yeah.
I believe it was the selectmen, wasn't it?
It was the selectmen.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, why did they write in the article that they were against it? To discourage, I believe the word was. Why would they,
Town council wrote it that way. It's not the selectmen against the selectmen.
the town council discouraged
It
it?
was written in a negative.
It's written in the negative
Yeah.
for approval. Or for
So a
for
no vote,
support.
a no vote approves it.
No votes.
Two negatives.
Yes.
No vote is in favor.
We are here tonight for a no vote or no article. If you don't even want to put the article forward.
You want a no vote.
That's right. No article, great idea.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I will again beg your indulgence on brevity, as we still have several more to cover, and we're very interested
I bring a lot of those, but in your.
to hear what you have to say. So please, have at it.
Okay, very briefly, Mr. Fest Joyce, our representative from the town of Milton, would like to say hello.
I'd like to say hello and introduce our superintendent, Mr. Quillia, and our assistant superintendent,
Stephen Moore.
Stephen Moore, all right? I'm blind, and it seems to affect everything I do. I can't
Well, you're
see you
here,
people
so
out
good
here, so I'm doing good, but you might be a little messed up here. Thank you. I would just like to say, we're very lucky to have these people running the school up there, Blue Hills. And this town is very lucky to have the quality of vocational school, vocational education that is available for our students. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Fess. Hi, my name is Jim Quilly. I'm the superintendent, director of Blue Hills Regional. I'm going to hopefully do this in about 3 minutes and then hand it off to Stephen Moore, who is our assistant super for business and personnel. This project we've submitted about 6 years' worth of statements of interest to the MSBA, and finally they picked us up after some prodding, some political pressure, and some just good sense-making by way of showing just the dire need of some of the systems in the building. This project is, I suppose, what you could call a deep renovation. It is not a new school. It does not have a lot of the things that we personally considered frills when we were doing our value engineering. For instance, there was a question about whether we were going to pave the parking lots. No. Is there going to be increased classroom technology? No, we're already at 1-to-1, but we are going to replace our network with a fiber backbone under the project. And new switches and servers for obvious reasons. So that when you look through this document here, you'll see some of the major systems that are being addressed. It's not what you would call a very pretty project. It's not like I can go to you and say, look at all these wonderful elevations of this. I mean, the actual the elevation of the animal shelter over there is certainly better looking and more architecturally aesthetic than what our building plans are. But we want to keep our school functional at a reasonable cost for the next several decades. That's the purpose of it. Get to the point, do what needs to be done. There are 2 other schools in Massachusetts, 2 other regional vocational schools that are being constructed or in the process of being approved at this very point in time. One of them is Minuteman for about $150,000. There's another one at about $140,000 in Harwich.
Million.
Did I say thousand? Yeah, I'm sorry. The M, the capital M. 150 million. And those, and another one for 140 down in West Harwich. That's Cape Cod Tech. Both of those schools have a population that is at least 100 to 200 students less than ours. We have a very large facility, and this is the most cost-effective way to go about it. It's also, Steve will show you the financials behind it, are sensible to do it under a 30-year bonding and financing. I don't want to go, I really don't want to take Steve's time, because you'll see in, I know you will have questions about the financials, because it is the nature of the group that I'm sitting before right now. But just understand that if you review this document, it will give you pretty much the scope of the project. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Mr. Moore. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. This was sent to the committee, a document that has that brochure, and that I had a couple of them that I passed out. The total, if you look at page 1, it says Town of Milton project cost model. So first of all, the first cost that's incurred by the Town of Milton is in the year 2020. And right now, our modeling is showing us that that is $86,870. So that's capital project cost on top of whatever any assessment would be. The way the project costs are calculated is that each member community share is based on their enrollment for a 4-year period. So it's the average enrollment for a 4-year period, gives you a percent, that's divided into whatever the bond payments are for that year. So that determines what yours will be. We have towns that are paying as little as $20,000 and towns that will be paying as much as $500,000 a year. So Milton is in a good spot there. The charts that we have put together on the next couple of pages, there's one that shows a 5% interest rate and one that shows a 3% interest rate. I want to thank Mr. Dennehy for being at our meeting last Tuesday, where we had the folks from the bank. A lot of people came over and talked about the project. We're looking realistically at being able to bond this project at the 3% interest rate. So the chart that shows you the 3% interest rate is the one that you want to focus on. The average payment, now we're looking at a project that costs $84 million. The MSBA has promised $43 million as a maximum grant, so that's over 50% of the cost of the project. The cost that remains to the member towns is $38 million, a little over that. Our model is using $40 million for the purposes of borrowing, so we've overstated that a little bit, and we're looking at a 3% interest rate. We're staggering the borrowing, as you can see on the page that talks about project cost and borrowing schedule. So the first year, there's some bands that need to be repaid. The district will cover that with its operating budget, because there's always been about $600,000 in capital improvements in that budget. So that will be covered. And then as we get into the following years, it'll be continue to be bonded. And then we have to borrow another $3 million at the end, because MSBA doesn't pay you back all of your money to the end. So we will issue a band for that. When the MSBA pays up, the interest will be rolled in. So that's an overview of the financials. The per pupil cost is around $1,700 a year currently. If you're looking at that first year payment of $80,000, it would top out at about $3,000. Our plan is, in the first couple of years, one, to keep our operating budget as low as possible. We're in the process of negotiating all of our union contracts, and rule one is you're going to get no or very little raise in 2020. We're trying hard. You know what it's like if you've been through that process. So we're going to do that. Also keep all of our other costs to a minimum, so that $80,000 assessment is as close to the increase as going to be. Really stagger this in. We don't want anybody to get sticker shock. We have $600,000 in capital budget. We would apply at least $500,000 to the bond payments the first year, as you can see in line 4 on that chart there. So that reduces the overall repayment from $2 million to $1.5 million, and that's what towns would be paying. And then probably in the next year you could see 500 and whatever, but eventually it would get down to 300, whatever. You know, if the district is going to have to do some improvements over time, but ideally we'll, you know, Milton's in an $86 million to $115 million annual raise. Increase. A couple of things that are really important to note. It was the very last sheet. I hope you get a chance to look at that. And these are the costs that you're not paying by doing this. The superintendent alluded to the two schools that are building new schools, one for 128 million. The state is giving them 41 million. They're spending 128, the state's giving them 41. The local towns are paying $100 million to build new schools. In Minuteman High School in Lexington, it's $144 million for that school, and the state's giving them 44. The municipalities are paying $100 million each, between them to build it. You can kick the Blue Hills project down the road. So you know what? Why don't we do it in a couple? But eventually, you might kick it too far, and you need a new school. Okay? If we wait 3 years, consider cost escalation 5% every year. MSBA is locked in at $43 million. No more, no less. You want to wait 6 years? MSBA says, fine, wait 6 years. We'll give you 43. Everything else is on you. So now you've added $3 to $4 million a year to the cost of the project. Secondly, or thirdly, we have to fix these things anyhow. I mean, the electrical infrastructure is gone, the plumbing is gone, the windows are going, the heating, the building.
We've had two, not to interrupt you, sorry.
Yeah.
We've had two major failures of our heating loop that have flooded office suites 2 winters in a row, and those are major repairs.
Yeah, so.
Okay, I'm going to cut you short now.
Okay, so
have-
you get
have 1 minute.
all the information. You have all the information. This is, I hate to use the expression, this is a great deal, take advantage of it, but this is the best deal you're going to get on fixing Blue Hills at any time, and that's all we.
I have one question for you. What is the cost of instruction per student relative to what I think I know what we pay here in town. What is the cost of instruction per student? Mike?
So the assessment for the 49 students at the school this year is $830,000.
Okay.
A little over $830,000,
Yeah.
which is about $17,000 a student. They're going to add another 10% onto that at about $1,700 per student. Is that right, Steve?
That
Yeah.
seems very much right. In 2020, so there's 2 years before
I'm
that.
sorry, would you run that by us?
You're paying about a little over $17,000 per student.
Just under 17,000.
Around
For
$17,000.
the kids that go there from your town. And our cost of instruction in the public schools, Mike?
Milton Public Schools at May town meeting said it was about a little over 14,000 per student.
And that's weighted high school down to kindergarten.
But a major point of clarification there is that in ours is included all of the health insurance and other benefits that the municipal side usually picks up, so that tempers it closer to us.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're vocational, so we know.
Understood. Yeah, there's an equalization, which I understand.
Yeah, so
So it's not outrageously priced, no matter how you slice it.
we think it's a good value.
I would agree.
I wouldn't disagree with you, honestly, but that's my opinion. I'm not the committee.
Yeah, so our preference is for you to refuse to put the article forward because it makes sense not to vote on it, or to recommend that the article isn't supported as written.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. We have questions from the committee. Tom, please.
You had mentioned that prefer to not go forward than to go forward and not have a chance of getting rejected. Is that?
Right, the way the law is written is that a town need not take action to approve the borrowing by our district committee. You're going to, Mr. Dennehy and the selectmen will get a letter probably in 2 days that say you have 60 days to elect not to support the project. If the 60 days expires and you've taken no action, it is deemed that you have approved the project.
Okay.
That's after town meeting, Tom.
60 days after that?
No, it will be, town meeting will have taken.
Town meeting fits in that window. We purposely made sure that every one of our communities that wanted to have a town meeting could and be in the window.
Okay, so if you take no action, then it just automatically.
It automatically passes.
Okay.
And is that based on a percentage of enrollment?
Yes, and that will change every 4 years. It will be recalculated in the packet that I sent you.
It's recalculated every year based on a 4-year swath of students.
Yeah.
Right, and in the packet that you have, there's a historical average going back to 2009, so you can see what the trends were in the past and use that as ability.
And what's that percentage rate that we're working within?
It's a little over 5% of the school
Right.
is matriculated by Milton. right?
No, I have that, the rate that kicks in order for us to take the no vote. I mean, is there a certain percentage that we have to be, is it 10%, is it 15%?
Percentage of
Of the total
of the
enrollment of
towns.
the, Blue Hills.
Oh, no, this is not a majority of vote by towns, by the 9 sending communities. It's all or nothing.
Everybody.
One town votes no, then we have to move to a district-wide ballot initiative.
And then put it out in front of the voters, and you may or may, if that passes, you would be obligated then to pay.
And that vote would be majority.
And that could
That would
also,
be simple majority.
could also cause a case for escalation if we can't do it in time.
How much for a new school?
Well, the ballpark figures that were thrown at us the other day were about, based on our population, relative to what construction costs are right now, and would be, say, in another couple of years, about 160 to 170 million.
Of which you would get the same amount of money based on the previous one, because not all costs are reimbursable.
Yeah. One other thing, very important thing, there are some questions that come up depending on the town that we're presenting in front of, about how about if you didn't bond this and you took this, you did this project in a bunch of smaller bonded progressions or phases, for lack of a better word. But, and I started running some of the figures on this, and I broke it down into about 3 major phases, because a lot of the systems that need to be done are so large they need to be done at once, and they're very expensive. So even with 3 phases, if you did one at 2 years, another one at 10 years, and another phase at 20 years, by the time the escalation kicks in and no MSBA kick in at all, it ends up ridiculous for the same project, the price overall. So.
Question about sort of how, I mean, you know, we understand the cost for all of the equipment and the HVAC system. How does this kind of improve the teaching and learning? I mean, what's the kids kind of getting out of it beyond sort of a better looking school?
Yeah, it's actually, the visuals in the school inside aren't going to be radically different. The outside will look a little bit different because the envelope would have new windows and a certain amount of, you know, soffit trim and so forth, doors and entries and so forth. On the back of the short pamphlet that I sent you outlines sort of the educational benefits. And the biggest thing is the temperature control in the building, the amount of makeup air, which is practically non-existent at this point in time. There are new regulations that have been in effect for a little while and keep getting refined by the state that have to do with what they call return air or makeup air that's brought into the building that supposedly helps with alertness. I guess students must get asphyxiated over the day and we're just not realizing it. So, explains why I get sleepy at about 2 o'clock. I thought it was dietary. But
Same
yeah,
thing happens
that has a
at
lot to do with it. I'm sorry.
I said the same thing happened at the Warrant Committee, so.
At about 8.
Just very, very quickly, the HVAC changes, estimated cost savings in terms
That is
of
one
operating
of the,
costs?
that's one of the biggest chunks of the project. And the funny thing is that there will be some fuel savings, and there will be some electricity savings. We're entering into a net metering agreement with a solar company that actually, we're going to be buying the net metering credits from a facility in Westwood, actually, where it's going to be produced. Now, with all that considered, you still may not see a sizable reduction in operating costs because the new systems have so many variable parts to them. They require more electricity to run and to balance. They're constantly adjusting.
Scott.
Pardon me if I didn't read into the detail. How old is the school now?
This building it just finished its 51st year of operation.
And this is going to buy you, assume, somewhere between 20 and 25 additional.
Well, I'm hoping more than that. I'm hoping more than that. You know, in theory, I'd love to see another 50, but if we could get 30 to 40, that would be wonderful.
This is the first major renovation, is it not?
Well, we have done smaller projects. This is the
But
first
nothing of this magnitude.
major, since the second part of the building went on in the mid-'70s. This is the first one.
And only the second time we've come back to the towns for additional funds for borrowing, right?
Right, we did under a performance contract, we came to the towns to bond for $6 million over so many years, and that's been expired for some time now. That was a performance contract, and that was the only time that we have bonded since a project that had to do with the library, internal project.
Just one more very brief
One
question.
question.
Enrollment at the school, how close are you to capacity in terms of enrollment?
We're at 860 right now. MSBA calculates the ceiling at 900 students. We are not expanding the perimeter of the building. We're not adding any new programs at this point in time. We're keeping our educational program fairly static.
Any
So,
statistics on projected enrollment?
well, the MSBA actually ran those figures to it, and they concurred with what I was developing informally, and my model said that one side of the district, the birth rates were falling, the other side of the district, they were rising. So we're looking at about a static amount of students in the pipeline, and they said, for your catchment area, you are right in the sweet spot. Don't increase, don't shrink. You know.
That's
One more question.
How many are Milton students?
50, 49.
40, the average was 48.5.
Usually hovers around 50 or higher.
And how are they being retained? Are we losing any along the way? Are they sticking to the
To
program?
tell you the truth, most of the Milton students over time have been retained and complete the program. The only time it gets a little strange is when the students are found out not to be residents of Milton, and then we have to send them along.
I'm sorry, say
Although
that.
that does happen every once in a while, and I
When the
understand.
students don't what?
When they actually don't live in, the families don't live in.
Oh, all right,
the
I
district.
get you. All right.
And I believe there's an officer or a person in town that actually tends to that, and we work cooperatively with the town over that.
Just like the high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
Just, I heard you mention there, so the net operating is zero. We don't expect to see a reduction in the operating cost, but we don't
If you
expect.
do, it will not be large, because one of the things is that people tend to underestimate the amount of electrical draw created by a lot of these intelligent devices, computers and everything else. And I think the net draw on them is outweighing any efficiencies that we're trying to pump into the system.
That's good. Very good to know. Thank you very much for your presentation,
All right,
gentlemen.
thank you.
The chair will entertain a motion to not adopt. To vote to, no means yes on this.
Right.
So we have to, we
Have to ask the right
we have to
question.
put it the right way. We have to have a motion that will recommend not adopting the disapproval. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Are those the only two options, or is there also?
So moved.
What's the motion? I
Is there
can't
also the
propose.
motion to, is there also an option to, say, remand back to committee or to support them receiving a bonding ability? It is either to recommend town meeting
Why not?
deny this, no, or is there an option to say we send this back, like we did the other amendments?
I'm interested to know rationale.
We
And
just-
which would be a better option to support
Well, that's
their
the question.
position?
The letter that's coming out in a few days
Mhm.
requires a certain amount of time to act on it, otherwise we
If they
will
lose it.
be deemed to have approved it.
Mhm.
So if we don't put it before town meeting now, am I correct in saying that? We're gonna lose our opportunity to vote in either one,
For the town to vote.
for the town
Either
vote. Yes.
But if they don't vote either way, it is deemed to have approved their ability to
You
bond.
don't vote it down.
Yes. That's what I'm trying to make, is which is our.
Not bringing it, is not bringing it forward a better alternative than bringing it?
To supporting them in our judge, yes, or should we just
Vote it down.
bring it up to the entire town meeting and hope that they accept our recommendations? That's all, I'm
The
just
latter.
asking which one is.
Yeah, the latter.
But
I know for the purpose of.
I'd like to
we
make a
should-
motion
To disapprove.
to disapprove.
second,
So we don't know the
Discussion.
answer to the question. So, okay, never mind.
We
We
have
Yes.
discussion, so bring up the
I
discussion.
guess the only discussion I have is, I am really concerned, I think the members of the board of selectmen are concerned, just the wording of this thing is just gonna confuse.
I don't disagree.
There's nothing we can do about it.
This is to send it back to the committee, I think might delay the consideration and put somebody in a box somewhere. I
Yeah.
don't know that that's...
Yeah, that's what I was
I
asking, to
think,
try
I
and
think we
find
can get,
which is a
the town
different
moderator is a
alternative,
very
but
bright man, and he can explain it to the town meeting, and I think we can leave it in his
There's been
hands.
negative moments before he was able to explain, so.
That and the details.
Yeah, that was
Just
gonna
approve
be
chapter
my next
71?
question on that.
Because that,
We could, but that's not how this is worded, and rather than go back and redraft and let it go to committee, I think we have a motion on the table to disapprove, and I think if...
But we have the option of writing it up in our detail when we submit the warrant.
We can do that in our...
Yes.
And explain why and no means yes.
Right.
And I think that may be faster than sending it back to a committee. I'm
Yes.
suspicious that's what we can do. And we can devote the time to that, even though we're expected to have the material by Friday to the printers. So we're going to have to move like lightning, but I think we'll end up doing that nonetheless. So if there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. All in favor of voting to disapprove this as written, please say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 11. All opposed? Any abstention? 1 abstention. Okay, thank you very much.
Just one question. We fully intend on attending the meeting. Is there a need for us to have a presentation?
You need to talk to the town moderator.
That's up to the town moderator. It's about
Because
his.
Yeah,
people
you
have
can present
questions.
regarding your article.
Mike Dennehy.
In a power-
Okay.
Okay, PowerPoint maybe?
I just need to
Yeah.
know what we.
People may have questions, and you want to be able to answer them correctly.
Very good. Okay,
I'd say
we still
yes.
have.
Do you want
these back?
We still have, I think if we soldier through, Mr. Whiteside can come and help us. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Good luck.
Thank you, good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck,
Sounds
guys.
like a great project.
Pre-existing structures, signs, temporary signs, and there is one last cleanup on the marijuana that we did not vote on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I'd like to thank you guys for all the work you put in.
well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
It's appreciated by a lot of people in this town, believe me. Thank you.
We're grateful for that. So we still have the signage and one more designation of sections under the zoning bylaws, Article 51, which we didn't vote on, but the recreational marijuana to consider. So, Mr. Whiteside, if you want to briefly give us, start with Section 3C of the zoning bylaws, we can move through this.
Okay, here's what we suggest.
Do you have any more of those?
What?
Do you have any more? Oh,
Oh, jeez.
more stuff.
What we hope
This
to
is not
avoid.
okay.
Not okay. Fine. Right.
You're not, you don't accept them.
And they get through the second to last
A
page.
couple of comments.
Here, I'll take one.
In the second line, in red afterward, we get that. On the last line of the first page, after the words "each face," there should be a comma. And on the second to last page, where it says "see action by the sign review committee," and there's a new clause in red saying "at the expense of the applicant." It should be deleted because if you look, you'll see that 2 lines later it says public hearing shall require published notice and mailed notice at the expense of the applicant. So saying it twice is unnecessary. And on the last page, where in the last line where it says "this paragraph 4," we should take out the word "this," because this is actually in paragraph 5. So just take out the word "this" and it works.
But it has, if it's in
This-
5, why are we keeping 4?
Because it's in
Bylaw.
5,
Oh, okay.
in paragraph 4.
Tries to make some sense of advertising signs in business districts. It establishes certain parameters for the signs, but it does allow the sign review committee to adopt regulations which are different from the parameters set forth in this zoning. And the reason is that as we went along, people would say, well, what if this were to happen? And what if this were to happen? And what if they had businesses on the second floor? Could they have a sign over the windows? And we think the sign review committee should be a principal player here. And the sign review committee, when it adopts, and you'll see that the new paragraph 5 on the last page gives the sign review committee, subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen, the ability to prepare, maintain, and periodically update or revise a sign and facade design handbook. And this would have the rules for signs. We're not trying to write all the rules in this zoning because it would be much longer than it is, and it probably would not be responsive. So, you will look once again, or you might look at the last page where we have an alternate provision. And one is if someone is dissatisfied with an action. The way this works is that the sign review committee gets it from the building inspector. They have a hearing unless it's a really straightforward application. And then they send a decision back to the building inspector, who has a chance to refer it back to the sign review committee for further action. And then it goes back to the building inspector, who issues a decision or a permit. He issues the sign permit, or he denies the sign permit. And if someone's dissatisfied with the issuance or the denial, they have the right to appeal. And there are two options. One is the usual option from a decision of the building inspector, which would be to go to the Board of Appeals. But the Board of Appeals thinks the selectmen should do it. And it makes more, the selectmen currently do it. And it makes sense for an elected body like the selectmen to do it. So we would recommend, I mean, we leave it up to you, but there has been, as to what you recommend, and of course the selectmen can decide what they feel. The Board of Appeals usually never gets a say, but we think that the appeal to the Board of Selectmen is something for you to seriously consider. So that's the article.
Thank you.
So-
As the discussion.
So what's in the, is it both?
Either or.
Either, it says either or?
Either or.
Alternative, someone's got to choose.
Town meeting is.
Who makes the choice, though?
Well,
And what,
I mean, we would have made the choice. We asked the selectmen, do you want to do it? Do you want the Board of Appeals to do it? We haven't gotten an answer. And so we have not,
This leaves it effectively up to the town meeting to decide?
No.
Or does it leave it to the selectmen? I guess that's where it's our
it's your
recommendation.
recommendation. How do you recommend?
Okay.
Now,
So,
the Board of Selectmen
Don't want to.
are now currently the
now
appellate
do it, right.
body. If we just strike both alternatives, does that not change anything and leave it as it is? Or do we have to pick one of these?
That's a good question.
Either keeping it with the Board of Selectmen or transferring
You
it to the
don't
Board of
want,
Appeals?
I mean, if the building inspector, if you just say nothing, then presumably the appeal,
Process
I mean,
remains the same.
what we've got, it would go to the Board of Appeals, because that's what you do with building inspector decisions. You don't have to say it goes to the Board of Appeals, it goes to the Board of Appeals. So, you.
But you said signs go to the Board of Selectmen.
What?
No.
You've got to say
We
it
have
goes
to
to the
say
Board
it
of
if we want
Selectmen.
it. But they didn't have the time to say that they wanted
I'm
it.
wondering
but
how much
signs
time the
automatically go to
selectmen
the Board
have
of
for
Selectmen.
issues of this.
But I think they already do go to the Board of Selectmen for appeals, not the Board of Appeals.
So
They
now,
can be quite contentious issues.
I can imagine.
Yes.
I don't understand why the Board of Selectmen did not show up and explain why they thought maybe they should do it, or the other party, the
actually,
sign
The
committee.
Mike is here.
We can
Mike,
ask
do you
Mike.
have?
Selectmen are
Could you let
just-
us know
Sure,
the reasoning?
so the Board of Selectmen would prefer to keep it in the hands of the zoning board of appeals.
I'm not surprised.
Yes.
The zoning board of appeals think it should, in fact, go to the Board of Selectmen.
But am I-
So now
but
we have to.
yeah, I
we
know
have to
each one
divide
wants the other one to do it, but
Oh, neither one of them want it.
as it stands now, don't sign issues go
To the Board of
to the
Appeals.
Board of Selectmen?
It should go,
They go to the selectmen now, and the
Yes.
selectmen want to kick it back to the
They
appeals.
haven't been one.
Yes, and in clarification, I'm on the sign
Haven't been
committee,
one.
so.
Oh, okay.
There's two problems. Number one is they get very contentious.
Yes.
Very political.
Yes.
Usually the store owner is not a resident of the town.
No.
Usually there are 100 residents and they're screaming and yelling at you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the pressure is tremendous on an elected official.
Yes.
That would be the same thing in the elected official
Number
personnel
two is
bylaw.
they tend to get very technical and you
Yes,
just
they
want,
do.
your head just starts spinning.
I'm on the sign committee, yeah, they do.
So
Between measurements
that's
and
why some
backlighting.
don't want it.
So the real-
Exactly.
So the real issue is, do we approve this with the alternative paragraph D to the Board of Appeals or to the Board of Selectmen, if I'm understanding this properly, and the addition of paragraph 5, effectively? Or,
Well, no, the paragraph 5 is part of the article.
Well, we have to
Right.
recommend one of them.
Well, there are more changes
but,
to,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
I
this.
understood that, But
oh,
the
okay.
substantive changes that I'm looking at is, in addition to the other things that we've seen here, the wording anyway, have to deal with the appeal. Is that accurate?
Well, should we wrap that one? Because overall, what I see in this is that we went from certain types of signs not requiring a permit at all to all signs requiring a permit now.
If it's illuminated or oversized, no, everything requires a sign permit, but you don't have to have a hearing for all applications. Everything all the applications go to the sign review committee, and then they come back to the building inspector and they say, "Look, this looks great." He then issues the sign permit unless he sees that there's something wrong with what's been done.
Has it always been the case that all signs have required a permit?
Yes.
Okay. The language was different.
Yeah, in all cases, the building inspector, as Alex said, it goes to the sign review committee typically, and then, I think simultaneously the application goes to the building inspector. I think
It's a confused process
Yes.
currently.
But the building inspector does get an application. He generally waits for the sign review committee to recommend on it, but if it doesn't meet the zoning, he will deny it out of hand.
And can't he make the recommendation? I mean, that is his,
No.
no?
you have to designate.
He
accepts- yeah, accepts or rejects,
Doesn't meet the zoning, that's all he can do. If it doesn't meet the zoning, he has to disapprove.
So any signs that are in town right now
If the sign's
have,
lit, if the
Yeah,
sign's
it's
lit, he
lit.
basically has to disapprove.
Basically any sign's gonna go before the sign committee, we get a letter either saying that it's by building code permissible or not. And then we make the recommendations based on the guidelines
Right.
whether we
But
recommend
the
it or
building
not, and then it
commissioner
goes
will-
to
the
a
lit
board
sign,
of
the building
selectmen.
commissioner will
So
still disapprove it.
Yeah.
Like Sleepy's mattress issue way
Just-
back when?
Right,
Yeah.
he cannot approve it. This zoning does allow, does this allow lit signs or?
It doesn't allow lit signs,
Yeah. I thought
but
it
there
did.
has to be a hearing.
And that hearing is by
The sign review
sign review
committee.
committee, okay.
Gene,
And then
did you
the
have?
design review committee approves it, then
It goes to the building inspector, and the building inspector issues the sign permit. And then there is an appeal to the selectmen if there is dissatisfaction.
a resident can,
Right. A resident can or a board can.
Or business owner,
What?
or business
well,
owner.
business
business
owner wouldn't do it
owner,
unless
right.
it was
Denied, but if he was, but he goes to, or she goes to the Board of Selectmen
But
as well.
there is, you know, these signs can be pretty big deals, so you want people to get due process.
Sure.
And I think that this gives it to them.
Gene?
Alex, isn't it, but don't most towns just revert to the a Board of Appeals? Isn't that the normal? Oh, yes.
I don't know. I don't know. I've read all kinds of sign bylaws from other towns, and they're all over the map.
It is usually,
You're probably right. They probably go to the Board of
yeah,
Appeals.
because they are familiar with the ordinances, they are familiar with the structure, and, you know, the selectmen are familiar with the government, the laws of the town, but the Board of Appeals are so specific and so regimented that usually it falls to the Board of Appeals because they banter back and forth, they understand one another. So if you take it out of that realm, it's difficult, and then you give it to more or less laymen. It's difficult to understand, and the meetings go on forever, and there's a lot of animosity where if you just leave it in the town, there isn't that heated argument because they just follow the rules.
There is an indication that the Board of Appeals will go with the building inspector if this is, if they get the appeal, they will, the building inspector will have to have made an egregious error I mean, they're not going to, their Board of Appeals isn't going to redo the application and what the sign review committee did. They're going to just see if the Board of, the building inspector's decision was, had a basis.
Yeah.
Whereas the selectmen could
Override
do
that.
a lot more. They could override it.
Override it.
And they are, after all, elected to, and there are going to be 5 of them after all.
Oh, so that should go on
So they can
forever.
make-
To be honest,
We have to-
Holy moly,
we have
why
to
would
bring
you
the
want to do
discussion-
that?
to be
We
honest,
have
I
to
think.
bring the discussion to a close. So
Yeah.
if there are any other points that we
Well,
want to make?
I was just in response
yeah, a
to
bunch.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, to send it to a Board of Appeals as opposed to the Board of Selectmen I would think, lend decisions to be based more on a technical level. It would therefore sort of exclude community input, because the answer would be, well, it's not violating any code, it's meeting building standards. And if the community doesn't want, say, a nice brightly lit sign next to the residential area, which has happened more than once,
Right.
there would be no reason against it. There would be no pressure to be brought against it, so that the neighbors would not have much recourse.
Well, the people are the ones that voted it in initially anyway, so, I mean, it
No,
is their
but in
law.
this process,
Yeah,
it would be just to a Board of Appeals, and they would mostly go, well, technically it's allowable, it's fine, it's not violating anything, as opposed to a Board of Appeals, I mean, the Board of Selectmen would be able to say, we don't think this is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, or it's a different,
but
more
the
politically
way
vague.
the way it's written, it is always kept in the character of the town. When it was originated,
Yes.
it was, so do you want to keep debating that? It should be technical, it should be a technical response. And I'm not removing the artistic, I've been ruined sort of scenario, but everybody feels like that. So it does have to be technical, and you can't have favoritism, and you can't make rules of exception for everybody that comes in. Sorry, I've been a selectman. And you can't do that. I mean, you kind of have to stick to however this person is treated. If it's generally the same, then that person should be treated, and that's why it stays within the town.
But Jean,
It's
do you
always
think it
staying
would
within the
make,
town.
really
I mean-
makes a difference if the assessors get it regard to citizens' input? It's the same bylaw with the the selectmen and the assessors. One way or the other, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just curious why you think that citizen participation might be less through the assessors as opposed to the Board of Selectmen.
Board of Appeals.
Board of Appeals.
Oh. It's just, in my experience, it's the way most towns are run. It falls to the Board of Appeals. It stays within that realm, and they all identify with that.
That's right, it's all over the map, that it's not most towns.
Yeah,
But
well, it could be. It could
currently
be.
does
That's
go to
just
Board of
my
Selectmen.
experience.
I don't know.
It works better, there's less arguments. The Board of Selectmen are up to their teeth in other things, and this is the realm of the Board of Appeals. That's what they do. So, just my opinion.
Okay, one thing that Alex said does bother me a little bit. You know, typically what would happen, the Board of Selectmen would get, would have a hearing on a sign because it does not meet the zoning. And typically that's when you're listening to arguments saying that, yeah, this is in the business district, and because of unique situations, there is a need for this sign not to meet the zoning. The Sleepy's one, not so much the lit sign, but the putting of the sign on the roof. Well, the way the building was configured, unfortunately, there was no, because it was all windows, there was no way to physically put that sign because the zoning did not allow a roof sign. It only allowed it below the soffit. And there was no way to do that other than pointing it back out towards the neighborhood, which was blinding the neighbors across the street on Sheldon. So we did make the decision that that was the lesser of two evils.
Yes.
And what Alex was kind of saying is, well, the zoning board probably wouldn't do that, but I guess wouldn't we have this? Wouldn't a person coming before, a business owner, have the same right to go for a variance of the zoning?
Well, they could ask for a variance, but also another thing that you can keep in mind is that here we already have a procedure for the Board of Appeals, but the procedure, if the appeals goes to the selectmen will develop it will be a similar process, but they will make the rules for the appeals to the selectmen, and they can probably make a provision for a more meaningful appeal than you would necessarily get from the Board of Appeals.
So we have before us a multi-pronged subject in terms of how we take this vote. So the chair will entertain a motion constructed so as to accommodate one change or the other, which is those included, the changes included in General Zoning Bylaws, Chapter 10, Section 3C, in the paragraphs noted, including either to the Board of Appeals or to the Board of Selectmen, at the end of which.
Right.
I think those are our choices, unless someone else has another option.
I'll make a motion to accept the zoning bylaw as written with the alternate paragraph to the Board of Appeals.
Alternate paragraph to the Board of Appeals is moved.
Second.
Second, discussion.
I just want to note that it's not just that section, it's actually substantive changes to what signs are actually allowed.
Yes.
That.
We haven't
We
talked,
didn't
we
talk
haven't
about
talked about
any
that
of
at
those
all.
things.
We
Oh,
haven't-
we're just voting on this one piece?
Well, we're voting on the we vote on all of the changes as discussed in the motion, with one end, alternate paragraph at the end, or the other. If you want to bring up, this is the time to discuss the substantive changes that you note, because we're voting on those changes with the paragraph to go to the Board of Appeals.
Yeah, it's difficult now. When I reviewed it, I had the zoning the current bylaws on my computer, and I
Yeah.
don't have them printed, unfortunately. But there's the significant differences between the paragraphs here and what are currently in the zoning bylaws. And I didn't read before that there's a permit, but if there's currently a permit process, would some of the language in here says maintain an advertising sign, you need to get a permit. Is the idea that if somebody already has a permit under the older guidelines that are different than these new guidelines, will they need to get?
Are they grandfathered in?
Based on, it doesn't say.
Based on the law.
Based on the law. Okay. Because as it's phrased in here, it says if you're going to maintain an advertising sign, you need to apply for a permit. So there's that one piece I had a concern with.
Well, they have to be erected and maintained, so I think that the fact that erected and maintained presumes an erections that has occurred under this or.
Okay, but practically, there would be a concept of grandfathering in, so we're not going to have to.
I don't think there's any question that the existing signs are grandfathered.
And then the sidewalk sign permit process.
Yeah.
Have there been concerns for those who haven't? There was, I don't think there was any requirement for sidewalk side permits under the prior zoning bylaws, but now you get a 30-day.
The town administrator does sidewalk signs. If the town administrator were here, he could tell us.
Technically, because the temporary signs were in the residential sign bylaw, there was no similar temporary sign, I don't believe, in the signs in a commercial under the.
Right, and the bylaws, yeah.
The bylaw was a mess.
It was very simple, or like, it didn't cover all. So, but now the process is that you get a 30-day permit, but you have to apply for it, and it's a 60-day application process. There's some of the timing in here that seems like it would prohibit.
I think that it's a different procedure. It's a town administrator procedure. I think it wouldn't take 60 days. I think it would be.
On a sidewalk sign?
The sidewalk signs. I mean, certain people on the planning board said we shouldn't have sidewalk signs at all. And this was something of a compromise.
Yeah, well, this is a 30-day permit.
Yeah.
It's a 30-day permit, but
that can be given right away, but only.
An application for a permit requires a response within 60 days. Okay. And then you have to reapply.
And first come, first serve.
First come, first serve, and then within 150 feet. It would be prohibitively complicated and expensive for a lot of small business owners to actually comply with that, which is most of the businesses in town. So we're going to attract small businesses. Over-regulating things like signs is a consideration.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious reason is not to have the street littered with sidewalks on it, but,
But we don't have that now.
Well, because you don't, I mean, there's no provision to allow it right now. We have in Central Ave, we have.
I do think the town administrator deals with these sidewalk signs currently.
So what would they be? Would they be like the speed limit signs?
No,
Would
no,
they be street crossings?
Like sale
the
today.
A-frame
Oh,
in front of
that's
the
right.
sidewalk.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
little
They
A-frame.
come in and go out.
There are some.
Yeah, I've seen them.
I won't
They
tell
are
you
in the
where, but I
town,
saw
yeah.
some.
They are.
I don't think they're permitted, but they are in town.
And
Yeah, I
you
know,
have to-
right.
If you recall, I said that these are the presumptive regulations, but the sign review committee can come up with other supplementary regulations in the
Less
design,
than-
yes.
That'd be more,
That
less prescriptive?
could be
then?
less prescriptive.
Really?
I mean, that's the fundamental basis of this bylaw, that the design handbook, a sign and facade design handbook can have different procedures if the selectmen, if the sign review committee recommends them, and if the selectmen approves them.
Alex,
Just,
on that handbook, if we're appropriating, if we're approving the appeal of board, the appeals board, to be the one that's going to making the recommendations on these signs, wouldn't they be in new paragraph 5, working with the sign review committee as being the person that would be approving this book? As opposed to the board of selectmen, because now they're not.
the sign review committee is going to write it,
Yeah,
and then the selectmen are going to approve it, just because we don't want an appointed body just coming up with a regulation. We want
Advisory.
the chief executive to, well, I guess the selectmen aren't the chief executive
Right.
anymore, but we still want them to approve it.
Alex, a couple of questions. Let's see, where is it? The very second paragraph where it talks about the size of the sign. It is allowing 2 signs now, which is nice, as opposed to 1, which we had before. How does the, 2 square feet for each horizontal linear foot? I mean, I can't even imagine.
You can't even imagine, and neither can I.
It is, but how does that compare to what the size was of a sign before? Bigger? Smaller?
I mean, currently, the signs allowed are so small that everyone has to get something bigger.
Right.
And this is attempts to be
Bigger.
reasonable.
Okay.
This is bigger, but
as
reasonable.
big as those signs?
As big as though, yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay, that's a good.
Maybe, I mean, you can see that we, on our projecting signs, we have some,
So projecting signs are blade signs, or could be
yeah,
blade signs?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, which is not permitted now in the zoning. You can't have a sign projecting off the building.
But this would allow that.
This would allow it. So this does a lot of good things that were not in the law.
I think we want to have the town to have some flexibility, and and we realize that we just can't write a whole series of rules and have them work in all cases.
Now, you had mentioned that there can be regulations written by the sign review committee, which I suppose if adopted by the board of selectmen would have.
We already have a sign and facade design handbook,
Correct.
which is used to determine what signs are going to look like. And this simply institutionalizes that.
Okay, but in terms of writing, I mean, you said, some of this might be written vaguely, but some of it's written very specifically. I'm sure regulation cannot overrule what is written specifically in here. In other words, like the 2 square feet for each linear foot. You couldn't write a regulation to override the bylaw.
Except the bylaw says you can.
True.
We're gonna have to bring
Yeah, I
discussion to a close at this point. We have the motion before us.
I have a question, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Just a quick one. You said it can project off the building, right?
Yes.
That's what we can allow now. Is there a height requirement for that, or?
8 feet, I
It
believe.
has to be at least 8 feet. It says in here, I believe.
Not less than 8 feet from the ground.
Okay. All right, that was my question, thanks.
Okay. So we have a motion that would adopt the changes in the article with the appeal to the Board of Appeals on the table. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Any opposed? 1. One abstention. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have 2 more to
Temporary
go
signs,
through.
temporary signs.
And then 3 existing non-conforming structures. Those are the 2 that we have left, and then we have to do the cleanup on the,
I'm going to ask you about a number of them. Which ones have you done construction noise somewhere else?
yes, we did that already.
Okay.
That's already
We're
passed.
not doing
We
that
think
again.
that it should be chapter 26.
Chapter 26.
So I'm gonna just send this around with a couple of,
So meaning our vote doesn't count, you want us to take another vote?
no, I don't think that you need, it's just
more
the,
housekeeping.
it's just the chapter.
More housekeeping?
It's just the
Yeah.
chapter
Oh,
of the,
okay.
I mean, it's not,
Nothing else.
no.
Temporary signs.
So temporary sign, you've done bicycle park.
We did bicycle parking.
How do we vote on bicycle?
I voted in favor.
I'm kind of against it.
I voted against
Structure
it.
notes, we already did.
Myself and Scott.
Well, I might as
against it.
well
I
pass
think one
this
abstained.
Right.
Yeah, paste it in again. Yeah.
Construction noise?
Have you done designation of sections yet?
No, that's that, and this are the two left, and then we have the one section on the
Pre-existing non-conforming structures you've
Those
done?
are the three we have left,
Okay.
and we've got to move through them because I promised that we would be out of here.
Okay.
Okay,
If you look at this temporary sign, it looks like I added a lot of stuff. I didn't. I just said, this is what the section is going to read when you do the changes. It's the changes inserted into the paragraph that's being changed. And the red is simply what it will read if you make the changes at the beginning. And it's not what we're simply doing is establishing a limit on the size of temporary signs. We say 16 square feet for each face, and shall not extend more than 5 feet in any direction, allowing the town administrator to permit a greater area.
Overall, I know probably, I have a question on First Amendment rights. Has this been tested? In other words, if it's a political sign?
If it's a political sign and it's 16 square feet, I think that,
A reasonable person would say it's.
I think, some people said do 12, do 10. 16 is a 4x4 sign. You can do quite a lot in a 4x4 sign, but it can't be a billboard.
We may have seen big billboards.
To that point though, what the edit does by not having a big run-on sentence for section B, but putting a period and saying no temporary sign, is the existing zoning bylaw only applies to business signs. But by putting the period and beginning the sentence there, it now applies to all temporary signs in residential neighborhoods.
Well, it's in the residential neighborhood section.
Yes, but so the language says temporary signs are permitted, provided that any temporary sign advertising commodities, and then it has those restrictions. So it's only an advertising sign of goods, services in a residential area that was previously restricted. And now, because you put the period and began the no temporary sign, it applies to all signs.
Yes.
So before, it wouldn't have captured the political signs, but because.
Before what?
Before this proposed edit. But because of this proposed edit, it does capture.
Before we didn't have a limit on the size of temporary signs.
But, so the limit on the side, but the section B only applied to business signs. And now section B, part of it applies to business signs, and then the other portion of it.
But this was having to do with businesses in residential districts, temporary signs for them. I mean, this B is in the residence of, it's part of the restrictions in residential neighborhoods.
Doesn't apply in the business district.
It's not.
Totally clear on that. The issue is that the restrictions under the section before were only business advertisements in residential neighborhoods, not residential residents putting signs on their own property.
You mean the bylaw that was already on?
Yeah. Yeah, so these zoning bylaws, without looking at what's presently on the books, you don't even know what the changes are. So I have the language, but only one copy, if anyone wants to see
It's
it.
accessory uses in residence AA, A, B, and C districts. That's what it's under. And it has to do with temporary signs in those districts.
But I think she's saying is adding the period.
Putting the period.
Adding the paragraph without the period.
Which paragraph?
Only,
Paragraph B,
That
as a
you've
whole,
submitted.
is qualified for just business advertising.
By adding
Because
the period, you've extended the scope of the second half of the paragraph
Adding the
to
period
all
after
signs,
45
not just
days,
businesses. Yeah.
Section 3.
So basically,
And it says that, and that any such temporary advertising sign on premises shall be no larger than the size which would be permissible if the premises were located in a business district. And the problem you have there is that you don't have a limit on the size of temporary signs in the business district. And maybe, that maybe that's what we should do in the spring, but just make it clear that these limits apply in the business district as well. But having a limit on the size of temporary signs in residence districts is a good idea.
for
Why?
every type of sign, not
Because
just business.
if you put up a 20 by 30 sign, a billboard, you can put up a billboard now as long as it's temporary. It doesn't say how temporary it has to be. So I mean, currently it's Wild West out there, potential Wild West.
And we're going to vote on
In
it.
previous state
Well, I don't know about
elections,
that.
candidates have gotten approval from private businesses to put a banner on their property, so you're saying they're not allowed
No,
to
no,
do
no, no,
this?
this says that you can get permission to do
Okay.
that.
Well, I guess
There's a
one of the
permission
questions
to
that I
do it.
had was temporary. What is the definition of temporary? Is there a time limit on it? Is it?
there's a
does it-
time limit, but only for the business signs.
That's yeah.
Non-businesses with that period are not
Non-business.
limited to 45 days, because the period
So a
separates the two.
non-business could be the library, it could be the synagogue, it could be the church, it could be a
Politician.
political
I disagree with
candidate.
With the original bylaw, temporary signs are permitted, and it's a comma talking about business signs, but the first part is talking about any temporary sign, not just business signs.
Right.
In the original.
Temporary signs are permitted.
Well,
Here, like that's that,
Any
and then
temporary
what's
sign.
right.
This continues to say that.
Right.
We didn't strike that language.
No, so the limitations that follow provided that, and then the limitations that follow are just for businesses.
Right, commodity,
Because we put
services, goods.
because we put a period, it's no longer just the business
Right.
signs.
Right.
It's all signs, including political signs, welcome home,
Right.
baby
Right.
announcements. All signs are now subject to
Right.
these restrictions, and you have to go to the town and ask if
Right.
you would like to put something else on.
If you
And
want to
then the
put a
ta-
banner over the street, you've got to get the town
And is
administrator
that
to
I guess the
agree.
question is that the intent of the
Yes.
proposal? Okay, there you go.
So
There's
the
your
intent
answer.
was to limit residents,
Yes.
What they could put up on their own properties.
their
Yes.
personal
It
statements.
was to limit the size of signs. You notice we don't limit the number of signs. I mean, this would, in my view, withstand legal scrutiny.
Is this something that we are comfortable putting to the town meeting to determine, based on this draft? Because this is, ostensibly, that's our role, is to vet what is going to go to the town meeting.
Personally, if you've seen some, there haven't been many violations of the 16 square feet, but there have been some
Yeah.
political signs, and
16
they
square
look
feet's
pretty damn
pretty
lovely.
Yeah,
They're-
yeah, pretty good. So I guess there's the question, are we comfortable placing this before the town meeting with our recommendation to adopt or not? And that's the discussion point. So the chair will be happy to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of sending this to town meeting as drafted, say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in favor.
Oh, I guess I
5 in
seconded
favor.
it,
This
so
is in
that-
favor. We are sending this to town meeting as
Seconded.
drafted.
That they
So I gotta
recommended
count
we
my
adopt,
vote.
they adopted.
All right, so we have 5 in favor, all opposed?
5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Motion is not carried.
Motion denied.
So this will be, our vote will, our recommendation to the town meeting will be to not adopt it.
Or did we need
Okay.
another motion for that?
No.
Okay, so we have,
Okay, next.
Before we let this go, because I think it is important, I mean, to leave it the way that to just outright reject it and recommend a no vote, I think there needs to be some regulation
To refer
here.
back to,
we can remand it to committee as we did with one of the others.
for
Can we do that now?
for more clarity.
But can we do
This is
that?
already on
We can-
remand.
we can do
What are
it.
we hoping to get from?
Well, that's the question. If we want to do that, we have to have a very good reason, because we did just take a vote.
So for those that voted against it, what would we like to see different on this? Because it feels like the downside of not putting this out there is worse than what we're hoping to get from it, from sending it back.
Was it at one point, we separated the business from the personal, okay, at one point. And I thought that the town administrator was handling the personal. Were they not at one point?
Town administrator handles temporary signs.
There are no, in residence districts, only temporary signs are allowed.
Okay. So are we making all of the temporary signs, we're giving one rule for all the temporary signs now?
There's a different temporary sign for business in the business district.
But they're the same size, correct?
For advertising signs, though.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so what are the differences? We're still keeping the residential signs, we're still keeping the residential signs temporary.
But they never had a restriction on the size, correct?
No,
And now, so now we're giving them a restriction,
yes.
4 by 4.
4 by 4.
So if you had like, your daughter had a granddaughter and you wanted to put a big banner welcoming them home and all that, that would not be allowed because it would be,
They all have to be 4 by 4. Well, square
Or
feet.
16 square feet.
16 square feet.
It can be 2 by 8.
You can have
One
a
by 16.
you can have a 2 by 8 banner saying, welcome home.
Or you'd have to go to the town administrator.
Or you go and
you
say,
want-
I want a
I want a
2
big
by-
one, right.
A 2 by 20 banner.
Yeah.
And according to this, you can leave it up all summer.
Okay, so it's not really temporary.
Well,
45.
45 days.
Well,
No,
according to this, it's
No,
not.
it doesn't say 45
No.
days. Because that
Very
was the, you see,
defined.
that, you get into the problem with political signs then. I mean, just how,
That's
right.
why we'd like.
So the
clarification.
question at hand is still, do we want to reconsider our vote and send it back for further drafting, or do we want to just send a no vote? So we'll entertain that, because we do have 2 more brief articles to consider, and we've been at this quite a while. So does anybody have an
We've already had
idea
a no
that
vote, so we need a
specifically?
motion to
Well, specifically to
reconsider
that
and
question.
send it back to
Right, do we want
referral.
to do that? I need to hear
I
somebody
just have a
suggest it.
question. So
Clinton.
if the option would be what, to take away the personal part? I have a problem with the personal part.
Right.
The personal signs. And talk about just dealing with the political signs or something else?
Well,
The businesses?
we
Political
can't
is-
deal with those. Our options are, we
Our
accept the no
options
vote
are
we've
to
already
take
taken,
it
or
and
we
give it-
remand it back to committee for clarification.
Right, and we've
What are we
already
seeking
voted.
what are we seeking
About
clarification on?
political
That's not
signs
clear
and
there.
temporary.
That's what I'm trying
Yes,
to figure out.
that's-
About political signs.
Well, that's what we're getting to, because we've already voted to not recommend to the
non-business
town
signs.
meeting as written. If we want to reconsider that vote, let's have a reason why, and then take a vote on repealing what we just did, and then an additional vote to remand it to committee with a suggestion or 2. So what do we want to do?
Let's vote on reconsidering it?
Vote on reconsider is up. Do we have a second? Do we have discussion as to why? What do we want to add if we do reconsider?
I think that we have to, know the limitations of the business sign, and then the limitations of the personal signs.
Okay?
Straight up, what are they? because right now we keep going back and forth, and never mind striking the commas or
Yeah.
adding words, just tell us what the ramifications are of a residential sign are and what are the ramifications of the business. And can't we vote on that?
They're the same, aren't they?
What?
They're the same.
I'd like to see the residential signs be allowed a
This
little
is-
bit more, you know.
Has to do with accessory
leeway.
uses
Maybe
in
make it
residence
bigger if they
districts.
wanted to have a sign out.
Are you
Okay.
saying they're exactly the same?
I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying that this is a provision regarding signs in residential districts. And temporary signs in business districts, I don't know that that's covered in the bylaw.
Okay, so I think we have a sense that we want, I wonder also, is it possible to define temporary clearly, or would you want to leave that
Once
intentional?
again, you say 45 days, but
Yeah.
elections go more than 45
Understood,
days. You
understood.
say 60 days,
If
and,
there's any more, I don't know, I just throw
45
that out
days is
as a
just
refinement, but that may not be possible, so.
I
right
mean, we
now-
can say 45 days with respect to advertising signs, because they're advertising signs.
We
but
could, yes, and I think we can leave that to
Dealing,
your,
dealing, trying to figure out how long a political expression sign of it's.
understood.
Yeah.
I think then if we have some sense of remanding it to committee to further define limitations of business and residential signs and leave it.
Non-business signs.
I'm sorry?
And non-business.
And non-business. Okay, non-business. That's fine. So do we have a sense that this is a good thing? Let's take a vote on that. All in favor of reconsidering based on that, and then our remand to committee with the limitation of business and non-business signs being further defined. All in favor of voting to reconsider? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're tied.
Chris should have left.
Okay, I guess the committee, then the decision,
Then the original decision
the
stands.
original decision stands. So
Did the chair vote?
the chair voted.
Voted.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's 6 to 6?
Yeah.
Did you,
Yeah.
did you deal with the bylaws updating and access?
No, we have to still do that one.
Shall I pass it out to you?
Which one? Updating and access, right, that's the market update, index, print, and digital copies. Can we do the designation of sections first, though? We have that one.
Of course.
Yeah, let's do that one first. We're almost done, guys. We're in the home stretch here.
This is pure housekeeping.
Right.
I could guess. Oh, they're just changing.
We have a
chapters.
number of warrant articles that got passed which didn't specify where in the zoning bylaw they were to go. So
Yeah.
the planning board has looked at them and assigned places for these items, such as the Great Estates bylaw that was passed at the last meeting, the Parkway PUD, which was passed at the last meeting. And we give a number to the temporary moratorium on marijuana. On marijuana retailers, even though we're probably going to repeal it at either in May or next October.
But this is effectively asking for the designation.
Right, this is housekeeping.
Okay. Any discussion, any questions?
Motion approved is written.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you very much. The next is, before we do updating and access, there is one further consideration of the recreational marijuana we did not consider. I don't think we did, we?
I think it's not there.
Hang on one second. Here, it's a little short one.
We decide on pre-existing
guess we
non-conforming
did.
structures.
I don't.
No, I guess.
You've done two.
Okay, I guess that's it. All right,
Two
that's
is
fine.
enough.
Okay, that's fine. All right, and then the last one is the bylaws updating and access.
Actually,
Oh,
there's
no,
a-
Jim.
Well, and pre-existing non-conforming
Oh, I'm
structures.
sorry, pre-existing non-conforming.
And what do you want to do? You want to do the bylaws updating and access?
Uh,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, why
Do
not?
it, let's do it.
all right. Currently, as you may know, our general bylaws, the document that the clerk will give you has only been amended through 2007.
Right.
And then, so you get this, the clerk won't certify that in 2007 it was right, but she will certify that these amendments, and these are all the amendments to the bylaws, just each one certified that this is the amendment that the town meeting passed. And it would be helpful, and I know that the General Bylaw Review Committee is going to address it, is to get these into an updated form. And keep them updated. The planning board, the zoning bylaws that we get from the clerk is the 2009 copy with, once again, with all the amendments since 2009, stapled to the bylaw, but not in a, they're not incorporated into the bylaw, and the town clerk doesn't certify the 2009 copy as being correct. The planning board has, in fact, itself got an up-to-date copy of the bylaws which we use because we can't use this.
Okay.
And we really want to, it really would be helpful if the town had up-to-date bylaws. And also, you remember that when we go to town meeting, we pledge to uphold the bylaws of the town. No one knows what they are because it's
Not available as easily.
it's not available.
This seems to me to be reasonable. Jean,
Okay.
please.
First of all, Alex, the town clerk, all right, she has a very small staff. So does she have the time, the staff, and the money to do this?
The position was approved for her to get that additional person last year at town meeting. So now she has someone that is going to be working on.
Just on this?
On the updating, that's what was stated,
Maybe
yes.
not, personnel board's pushing
Yeah.
back.
There you go.
So on
Second.
that, my question is, if the town meeting approved this position already to do this, why do we have to amend this into bylaws?
Well, this is just authorized, well, there's another problem. At one point, the town meeting, the planning board wanted to separate the bylaw into the provisions, general provisions, and the special provisions, an appendix with the special provisions. And in fact, we did it. I mean, we have an up-to-date copy of the bylaw prepared. But back when we proposed to do this, town council said, well, we've got to get town meeting to do something about it. And so let's have the town meeting approve the index. So the town meeting approved the index, and now there's a question of whether or not the index can be updated to reflect changes to the bylaw, because the index was passed in the town meeting without a provision that it can be updated. So this,
Okay, I think we get the point.
Yeah.
I think the question is this is a reasonable thing that has to be done? I guess this is still kind of housekeeping, Mr. Whiteside, is it
I
not?
don't know.
it's
A little more?
it's pretty
Is it not,
important.
are we not authorized, did they not have authorization to do this already?
Well, you see, what it does is allows the indexing. It allows the indexing, and this question, you
But isn't,
zoning
It's the same.
bylaw is
Adding
ready
stickers and
for
addendums,
issue.
just recodify
It's
it
been
so that, oh,
proofread,
it
it has
exists.
been, it's ready to go.
But isn't
But we-
that the town treasurer's job
Town
anyway, to be
clerks.
keeping the
Town
town clerk,
But
to be
this-
keeping this up to
It
date?
hasn't been kept up to date
But why?
for 8
They
years,
don't have
and
the
the
staff
other
to
one
do it.
hasn't
Now
been
she has
kept
the
up to date for
person
10 years.
approved.
She doesn't expect.
Does this, will the recommendation of this to town meeting affect what is intended to be done? That's my question.
Peter Mellon said, why don't you put in the word require? And I said, I'm not sure we can require the
We can
the
authorize.
clerk, but
An
to
administrator can
authorize,
require,
to
yes.
authorize does not require. And it seems to me that this is a fairly modest step
This would be harmless.
to a fairly
Unless the
significant
attorneys here can
problem.
tell me otherwise, this seems relatively innocuous.
I want to reread everything based on this. If we're going to have to go back and allow for future updates to everything we've done.
Wouldn't that be part of a person's job description if they're supposed to be doing it? And why do we actually need to make it as a town bylaw?
This
My
is
one
not a
question
bylaw,
was
this
why
is
do we
an
need
authorization.
authority?
I'm missing you.
My one question was why do we need authority
Well,
for
this is-
this? But based on that explanation, if it's just to check the box, I assume the recommendation comes from the town's
Planning board.
council?
This is coming from who?
That it's
This is coming from the planning board has not publicized its own, I mean, the planning board is the only body that actually has an up-to-date copy of the zoning. The public is unable to secure a copy of the zoning at this
And
point.
this would make it possible?
This would
Doesn't
address the
authorize.
indexing problem, and it would also,
Push.
But
It
Alice,
would
I do
push.
have an up-to-date copy.
You
Sue
do- you-
Galvin gave me them all the way up to 2009, and then she gave
and
me
she
every
won't
single-
certify the 2009 copy as accurate.
Well,
She will only certify the amendments.
which they are.
No, the amendments to the 2009
Less
copy.
comfortable I am.
Yes.
Yeah,
I have to admit, the more I hear, the less comfortable I am. I thought this was going to be relatively perfunctory. It sounds like it isn't. It sounds like there's actually something more here than meets the eye, like we're sitting on a volcano. Maybe that's an
little,
exaggeration,
a
but
small
it's
volcano.
small volcano, but still something that might require a little more than authorizing the town clerk. It sounds like what we heard with the personnel board, not overseeing annual reviews to be completed. It's of great concern, and I think it's going to make its way into the chairman's report to the town meeting on this sort of thing. So I guess rather than prolonged discussion, we have to come up with a recommendation for town meeting. I think we've heard many of the issues and things that we didn't frankly expect to hear. So I guess the question is, do we have a motion to adopt this or to not recommend it for whatever reason?
Personally, I think it should be in there. I guess even if it doesn't, even if it's not able to accomplish its final goal of getting it, at least it'll start something in motion.
Yeah.
You know, what we could do is put a qualitative in with the recommendation saying this is indicative that perhaps certain functions need to be given more oversight.
In the comment.
In the commentary section. I mean, I don't ever like to go and be blathering along about stuff like this, but based on what I've heard, I think there's...
Well, I guess we don't even know how it got there. I mean, you know, why is the town clerk uncomfortable with certifying the
I don't
existing
understand
2007?
She
that.
hasn't read, she knows what the amendments are, but she is not clear whether or not the 2009 edition is a correct edition.
And
so she
to
won't
do that,
certify
somebody
it.
would have
That's not
to
gonna
read
answer
through
that.
and compare it to...
Presumably you go back to 1938 and you
read everything.
And you read it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're almost finished. Let's just try to do this, Gwen.
If we approve this, there's nothing about any costs associated with it.
Right. Costs are gonna be associated.
We think the costs have already been approved and there's a person, but it sounds like
Should be
that
doing it.
may not be true. If it's perfunctory and it's not, there's no additional costs, I think we all want this.
Yes.
But if there's going to be additional costs, then we would want to know what those were.
It's not in it's not in the budget, so if there's costs, they'd have to come back.
Well,
They'd
again,
have money to do it.
keeping in mind that, you know, this isn't compelling the town clerk to do it, because you can't.
Authorizing the town clerk.
It's just authorizing the town clerk to do it. which is just, I think, getting out there, the frustration, and let's get something going. But, yeah, from what Alex is saying, in order to have the town clerk, and the town clerk has to be comfortable that those are the actual 2007 bylaws, somebody is going to have to reread them all, comparing them back to the original voted bylaws going back to 1938. Big job.
But you want to put them up correctly.
Well, that's an
Well, otherwise,
impossible job. Impossible.
I know.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the article as written.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just like to go to record. I mean, there's some inherent risk, right, that we don't know about. I mean, if you're a town member, you'd like to have your bylaws updated and indexed and have the ability to access them and then being able to use them. The town would have some interest in seeing that the documentation that they're providing to the town, and whenever there's a conflict, is accurate.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's, the inherent risk to kick this thing down the road is that it's going to cause more potential conflicts that could put the town at risk.
Well, this is in everybody's interest to
move it.
I think
Yes.
the nature of the task is a lot larger than people.
Yeah, no, it's very daunting. There's no question about
to
that.
establish one, a certified base, and
Yeah.
then to go through
Yeah.
each amendment, put them in it or recodify
I
it,
don't
and then
disagree.
certify
It
it.
is
That's
daunting.
correct.
It is a
I don't
daunting
think
task.
this is doable.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Well,
I
but they're,
agree, but it's somebody's
somebody's
job
job
to
now
decide
to
how
try.
it gets
Require
done.
the town
Yeah.
council's
Somebody's
input
job to
help the
try
town
and make it
clerk.
available.
I don't think it's a lawyer.
So we have the motion, and it's been seconded. All in favor of adopting and recommending to town meeting, say aye for approval. Aye, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All opposed? 1, 2, 3. Abstentions? 1. Motion passes. Okay.
Pre-existing non-conforming structures?
Yes, in 5 minutes or less.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. This simply says that if you have a house which is non-conforming, it's largely the C district with, the small lots, and you have a porch sticking into the setback area, that you can, and this is the porch is a non-conformity with the setback requirement. This says that with a special permit, you can extend that nonconformity. You can make the rest of the house with the same setback as the existing porch, so long as other houses in the neighborhood are treated that way, and so long as the change is in character with the architecture and there's no public detriment. It basically, what this does, this happens all the time under variance procedures. The Board of Appeals grants variances for decks and other things, and this doesn't get rid of all the variance things. It is a special category of the variance requests, but making it into a special permit provision is sensible, because variances are supposed to be only issued where there is something unusual about the specific piece of land, not that the lot is a small lot, just like all the other lots in the area. So.
Any discussion, questions?
Is it a good question? How are you defining neighboring? Do you mean abutters?
500 feet. Or 300 feet.
300 feet is what this says.
Oh, wait, 300 feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if there's no neighbors in 300 feet?
So does that mean if you have a tiny porch, you're able to extend it to either side of the house as long as it's a conformity?
No, only along this side. Well, if it extends into your front setback and your side setback, presumably you could extend it along other setbacks, and
Provided
and
it's the same
go up.
amount of setback, right?
Right, as long as you didn't exceed the setback, and as long as other houses had it.
Right.
And as long as the architectural appearance, once you're done, is consistent, and there is no harm to the neighbors.
So does this in fact help residents if they're trying to accomplish?
This is meant to try and help residents.
So hypothetically, if someone were to tear down and rebuild a garage that's 6 feet from the lot, and they wanted to make it a little bit bigger, longer width-wise along that same...
This only goes for residential structures.
Correct.
So the garage is different.
So it's okay.
Any other questions?
It's attached.
Alex,
Clinton.
Right.
Please.
Okay. Can you define harm?
Well, it's the usual harm in, set out in Section 9, which is what the Board of Appeals, in Section 9 of the bylaw, says, the board may make appropriate conditions limitation necessary in its opinion to safeguard the legitimate use of the property in the neighborhood and in the health and safety of the public. So it's pretty general, but it is it's a standard that's been used for years and years, and harm is, common sense helps define what harm is.
Is there nothing about view obstruction or anything?
I think that you certainly could argue that view obstruction is harm, if...
But not in that...
Context.
In this context. I mean, if you were seeking a variance, you have to show harm, and obstruction of a view is harm. But here, when you're dealing with building in the setback, you're probably not obstructing. I mean, there may be things like that, but that's for the Board of Appeals to determine. It's a common sense test.
Tom, did you have a comment?
just very quickly, Alex, a couple of years ago, or a year ago, we had a more far-reaching bylaw that never made it to print on pre-existing non-conforming.
Yeah.
What's the status? Is that still working?
Well, this is what emerged. What happened was we got too many lawyers involved, and they kept pouring stuff in, and eventually we had something that it was really impossible to understand what people were trying to get at. If there are further changes, we can do them.
It's incomprehensible.
Any other discussion on this? Otherwise, the chair will entertain a motion on this last article that we have.
I'll make a motion that they recommend acceptance to town meeting.
Second. Discussion further? Recommendation for pre-existing non-conforming structure, section 4 of the general bylaws, of the zoning bylaws, is on the table. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. Whiteside, thank you very much.
Oh.
There's a lot of work that you and your committee do. We thank you very much.
Well, good luck.
Now, thank you very much. Well, the hard work for this committee is done, and my compliments and genuine gratitude to all of you for the hours that you have put in studying and coming up with, I think, very reasoned and rational recommendations. And it has not been easy, I know that very much.
Thank you for your comments, and I make a motion to adjourn.
One second. We have, I'm obliged to ask if there's any new business.
I'll take them all.
Okay, and the next date, we will get this to the town clerk in time to be printed by Friday. I am leaving for Europe on Wednesday, so it'll be in their hands by noontime on Wednesday, so we have to get this done quickly. So I'll write the chairman's report and we'll get this done. Our next meeting should be two issues we have to cover. A schedule for budgeting, which I'm going over with Mike Dennehy in a couple of weeks. and making sure that we really aren't going to be caught short with a lot of last-minute additions, because the different departments are being given marching orders that they prepare a level funding budget and one with all the changes they want, so they come to the subcommittees once and then come to us once, because a revolving door of requests is too much for us to handle on a crunch like the town meeting and the full budget next spring. So that, and then our next meeting will be in October. I will send around, it'll probably be sometime in the second week of October after Columbus Day. At a convenient date, I'll send around if we can do it by consensus. That will be terrific. Otherwise, the chair will accept a motion.
Can you send the subcommittee assignments around?
Well, the subcommittee assignments we're going to talk about at that meeting. We haven't, because of all these other things that we had to discuss, the articles, we didn't get to that yet. So when we have our meeting in October, we will absolutely make the assignments. So in fact, I can ask for you to send me your request for what you would like to be on if you have an idea. Otherwise, that will be the topic for our next meeting.
Mr. Chair, one more.
Yes.
Clerk.
The clerk, we have to interview. Now that once we're done with all this, we'll actually carry out the interviews for the clerk. We still have 2 people who are interested, and we'll take this. Our small committee will deal with that once we get through this. We had to triage, and this is actually more important than that. But we will get the clerk in fine time to do the heavy lifting in the spring.
Motion to adjourn.
Before we do though, I would, because the days leading up to town meeting, I'll guarantee you there will be a need to meet for one reason or another. So you probably should.
You mean in October?
Yes.
I thought if we don't meet that second week, is that not soon
I don't know,
enough?
I mean, I guess you can kind of react to what's coming down the pipe, but, keep in contact with the town administrator.
Okay.
In terms of things coming through, whether the moderator will.
Well, there won't be any more articles, will there?
There can't be.
No, there won't be any more articles.
Right.
There still could be changes to things. Anything's possible.
When is the town meeting?
October 23rd.
I
So we
didn't write
will
it down.
probably have a meeting in there, but I'm hoping the primary reason for that meeting will be committee assignments, subcommittee assignments.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.